Today I'm going to talk. Got it. So today I'm going to talk to you about some things that you, the DIY gardener, that would be do it yourself, can do to help ensure a successful outcome in your ornamental landscape. Ornamental. I'll be talking about ornamental gardening, not food gardening. Some of the concepts I'll talk about are transferable knowledge, but others aren't. Also, I'll speak mostly in terms of concepts and how they tie into the idea of success in the ornamental garden. I call my approach successful landscaping because though a landscape may be pretty, it may not necessarily be successful. Well, my definition of successful. To me, success has as much to do with the gardener as it does with the actual garden. My definition of a successful landscape would be that it's pretty, or at least you like it. It has usable spaces that you actually use. It brings you delight. It fits into how much time and effort you want to spend on it, and it fits your budget. I think many gardeners become discouraged with their landscapes because they initially embrace a look or design without understanding what it takes to actually have that look or design. Is some particular look or design right for your particular property? Is it right for your needs? Does it fit your skill level and your tolerance for doing the necessary maintenance? Can you afford your dream landscape? Hopefully, today's ideas will get you headed into the right direction. First, we're going to look at 5 fundamentals I think can ensure success in one's ornamental garden. Then we're going to take a look at what plants need. They need culture and maintenance. This will be the main focus of today's talk, culture and maintenance. I'm going to present some ideas that may disrupt, hopefully in a good way, your current notions about culture and maintenance in the ornamental garden. So let's get started with the 5 fundamentals of success. Number 1, you can't always get what you want. Mick Jagger is singing about being realistic with your relationship expectations, but it's good advice regarding gardening expectations as well. It's good to be realistic about what is actually possible in the landscape and what you can actually afford. Fantasy is generally accepted to mean that which has no basis in reality. It's fantasy to want something, whatever it might be, that simply can't happen. It's fine to have an active imagination, but in gardening, fantastical expectations almost always lead to failure. There's nothing, including money, that will make a zone 10 plant make it through a zone 6 winter out there in the landscape. Well, you could buy a greenhouse. Money would buy that. But then that would not be gardening out there in the landscape. So the first fundamental of success is be realistic about your expectations. Number 2, planning. Do planning, lots and lots of planning, as well as study and research. Yeah, lots and lots of all of those things. It seems like for some reason, many people dive right into shopping for plants, then plunking them into the garden and calling it good. Winging it in the garden is rarely successful. Number 3, design and plant selection. Good design is a good thing. Good plant selection is a necessity. I could do an entire class on design and another entire class or 2 or maybe 3 classes on plant selection, but our time is short today, so I'm going to save in-depth talk on these subjects for another time, but we will graze along the edges of design and plant selection during today's talk, and I hope you'll get a feeling for just how important these elements are to success in the ornamental garden. Number 4, Culture and maintenance. Do you have the knowledge, skills, and time to do proper culture and maintenance? Or do you have the money to hire this guy to help you? This number 4 fundamental, as I mentioned at the beginning of my talk, will be the main focus today because it's all about what plants need. Understanding what your plants need will help you understand how much time and money you will need to spend on your landscape to make it experience success. Number 5, it's not nice to fool Mother Nature. It will always be easier and less expensive to work with Mother Nature, and apparent gardening miracles generally require extremes involving time, money, and patience. And as I said about managing expectations, that would be fundamental number 1. There's nothing, including money, that will make a zone 10 plant make it through a zone 6 winter out there in the landscape. And the reason is because Mother Nature simply doesn't allow it. So learning to work with Mother Nature helps ensure success in the landscape. So let's review these fundamentals of success. Number 1, have realistic goals and expectations. Number 2, do planning, study, and research. Number 3, do good design and great plant selection. Number 4, do good culture and maintenance. And number 5, respect Mother Nature. There we have it, the 5 fundamentals of success for the ornamental garden. It's just as easy as that. It's going to be easy, right? We all know gardening's easy, really easy stuff. Well, it might be easy. There really is a lot to know about gardening, what plants need, and what you need to do to help your plants. But luckily, there are lots of great resources out there to help gardeners. Books, libraries, clubs, classes, the internet, mentors, and friends. Oh my. These can all be helpful, but just exercise due diligence as you do your research to be sure you're getting actual facts and not conspiracy theories, myths, or fairy stories. Okay, we've taken a look at my fundamentals for ensuring a successful landscape. We're going to keep these fundamentals in mind as we talk about what plants need. Understanding what plants need can help you decide what type of landscape is best for you, your location, your situation, and your pocketbook. Employing the various fundamentals that ensure success may become more clear when we understand a few things about what plants need. So, what the heck do plants need? They need culture and maintenance. This is the number 4 fundamental, what the plants need. The other fundamentals are more about the gardener's needs, or might I say, the gardener's responsibilities. So culture would be the conditions plants need to thrive: right soil, right water, right sun exposure, fertility, etc. And the maintenance is the ongoing work that supports those culture needs. That's what you, the hitman, have to do to support and provide those needs, elements to your plants. So culture and maintenance go hand in hand. You can create the most incredible garden design ever, but without proper culture and adequate maintenance, chances are your landscape won't thrive. So let's start off with culture. Culture involves the knowledge of planting zones, soil, moisture control, sun exposure, size and space, and a concept called right plant, right place. We're going to take a look at all of these things that plants need. Starting off with planting zones. I hope we all know what planting zone we garden in, and if you don't, you can go to the website shown here at the top of the page, and it's also in the handout that Erica either has made or will make available. You input your zip code to find your zone. This planting zone designation is a hardiness zone. It refers to cold tolerance. The lower the number, the more cold a plant can take before it's killed by the cold. In general, we're zone 8 in Clark County. However, within the official zone designation, a location closer to the river or deep in the city might be zone 9, and a higher elevation is more likely to be zone 7 or even 6. Knowing your zone will help you with plant selection, which of course is the number 3 fundamental of success. Moving on to soil. Soil supports plants' needs. It contains 4 things: inorganic materials, about 45% volume, water and air, both 25% volume, and organic matter, that would be compost, about 5% volume. There is so much to know and understand about soil. Entire college courses are devoted to soil science, and it's fascinating. Well, I think it's fascinating. Yeah, it's fascinating, trust me. But today, we're only going to cover some of the basics that I think will be helpful to you in conceptual terms on your journey to understand how to provide plants with what they need. Let's talk a little bit about soil testing. Tests can help you, can tell you a multitude of things about your soil. Generally speaking, tests help you make decisions about your soil's need for amendments and fertilizer. At the top is a chemistry test. It shows soil pH and the amounts of the various nutrients, which are chemicals, in the soil that are available to the plant at the time of the test. This test helps you determine the soil's need for additional fertilization. That would be chemicals. So for this test, you use a spade to dig up a soil sample, and you send it to the lab, and then you get this test results back that you can read later on. Another test evaluates the soil's texture. Most plants are picky about their soil texture preference. For example, you'd not want to choose plants that prefer sandy soil if you already have clay soil. So performing a texture test and consulting the soil texture pyramid indirectly helps you determine your soil's need for amendments. So for this test, you use a spade and dig up the soil and put it in a mason jar with some water, like what's shown right here. And then you shake until it's all blended up. And then you set it in a quiet space and let it settle out for a day or 2, I cannot remember. But to better help you understand how to perform the test, I referenced a really great video in the handout showing how to perform it and how to read the pyramid that's shown right down here. It is in the handout as well. Now, generally, so far as I know at this time, neither of the tests tell you what to do with the information shown on the graphs. And that can be a problem. So after you have your data, you can utilize the second fundamental of success, planning and research, to find information about how to interpret the data. And remember, books, libraries, clubs, classes, the internet, mentors, and friends. This is where these things can be very handy. And a few words about amendments and fertilizers. Amendments alter soil structure, and fertilizers alter soil chemistry. Confusingly, some substances that are considered to be amendments also deliver some degree of fertilization, but that fertilizing effect is not their main function. Compost is one such amendment, and we're going to talk more about the compost in just a moment. Luckily and happily, most ornamental plants don't require much more in the way of fertility or amendment than what is provided by compost and mulch. However, if you're starting a new garden, the addition of amendments and fertilizer may be necessary to give the garden a good start. Both of the soil tests that I've just mentioned could provide useful guidance in this instance. And with all of that said, pictured here are three situations that almost always require soil amendment and or fertilization. That would be vegetables, turf grass lawn, and most annuals and containerized plants. And the reason for this is because all three of these types of plants are very picky about their soil texture preference. They are wanting soil that is extremely well draining, yet extremely retentive of moisture. That's a pretty high demand. And also, all of these things are what we call heavy feeders, which means they consume a lot of nitrogen and thus they need fertilization. So there's a saying about gardening and soil: feed the soil so it can feed the plants. This is Mother Nature's way of providing plants with their necessary nutrition. When was the last time you went out into the forest and saw anyone adding amendments or fertilizer to the soil or mulching it? I've never seen that. I'm pretty sure nobody does that. And no one does have to do that because Mother Nature designed plants to respond to the seasons in ways that would help them, the plants, provide to the soil what is needed for their own survival. All natural habitats do this without human intervention. Well, there's a little food for thought. So, how does one feed the soil? In other words, how can we emulate Mother Nature's way of providing nutrition to the plants in our landscape? Well, it's pretty simple. Just cover our ornamental beds with a layer of high carbon mulch like wood chips, bark, or fall leaves. Placing such mulch on top of the soil of our landscape beds allows nature to utilize the nitrogen cycle and the soil food web to make great soil and provide plants with what they need to thrive. Think of it as Mother Nature helping you do less work and spend less money. That's kind of nice. And without going into great detail about these complex processes, the nitrogen cycle and the soil food web, in a nutshell, what's happening in the soil is through microbial action, the mulch on top of the soil is turned into compost and nitrogen is converted from one form to another, providing nutrition for plants. That's the extreme nutshell version. But anyway, yes, Mother Nature makes compost from mulch to feed your plants. Pretty sweet. Many of us don't have space in our yards to make our own compost. We live in condos and apartments or tiny homes. We age, we get injured, we become ill, and we can't do the hard work of making compost. But if we orchestrate our ornamental garden properly, Mother Nature will do the composting for us. All we need to do is provide her with adequate mulch on top of the soil. Here's an important rule about compost and mulch. Compost goes into the soil and mulch goes on top of the soil. Or compost can go on top of the soil, then it needs to be covered up by mulch. Essentially, the compost is incorporated into the soil by merit of the mulch covering it up. Or just use an organic mulch on top of the soil, the way Mother Nature does. It will do the same thing as compost plus mulch because organic mulches eventually decompose. And I say organic mulch because there are inorganic mulches. For example, gravel would be an inorganic mulch. Just remember, mulch goes on top of compost. And just one tiny bit of information about compost because it's such amazing stuff. Compost is a soil conditioner. It helps overly porous soils like sand retain moisture. And it helps overly dense soils like clay drain better. It helps create air pockets so plant roots can breathe. And compost itself is not fertilizer. And I say this because the chemicals in fertilizer would be available for plants to use. But in compost, the nitrogen fertilizer is locked up in the compost itself and unavailable for use. Soil microbes are required to convert this locked up nitrogen into other forms of nitrogen that are available for plants to use. It's complicated. As I said 4 slides ago, mulch on top of the soil is turned into compost by soil microbes, and through the nitrogen cycle, nutrients are made available for plants to use. And yes, of course, as I have said, you can add compost to your soil when you first build the garden beds, or if there's evidence that your plants aren't doing well with mulch alone. Otherwise, really and truly, with ornamental gardens, particularly mature ornamental gardens, you just need to use mulch. And we're going to talk about mulch in the maintenance section. All right, moving on with plant culture. As we've just learned, plants need appropriate soil to satisfy their needs. They also need appropriate moisture control. You can definitely install an irrigation system to supply proper moisture to your garden. And we're going to talk more about that in the maintenance section. But for most ornamental beds, I like to recommend culture practices that can help plants avoid the need for too much additional irrigation in the first place. And I say this mostly because such irrigation systems can be expensive, and I feel they add another layer of work and complexity for the gardener. But with that said, it is always good insurance to install an irrigation system if you possibly can afford it. And remember, baby plants always need lots of water the first several growing seasons. And I say several because it's hotter, it's drier. They don't get to grow as much as they used to when we had lots of water. So they do need to be watered well the first several seasons. And one way or another, you're going to be watering these first seasons. So for ornamental gardens, we want to create water retentive soil by keeping a thick layer of high carbon mulch on top of the soil. We want to choose plants that are zone appropriate, right plant, right place appropriate, and I'm going to get to that, drought tolerant. We want to orchestrate a garden design that enables plants to eventually cover the earth completely, which also helps prevent weeds. So see how this is covered completely? I'm not saying you're never going to get another weed if you plant like this, but you'll get less weeds if Mother Nature can't find holes in which to put the weeds. And don't clean up the dead leaves and blossoms. This is nature's mulch, which turns into compost, which puts nutrients into the soil, which feeds your plants. And utilize woody plants. They usually require less water than do perennials and annuals, and they make mulch in the form of fall leaves. So for this type of ornamental garden, we need to water deeply and infrequently. Watering in this fashion encourages perennial and woody plant roots that are able to go deeper into the soil to do so. I'm sure you all know that not all plant roots go down to the same depths. And if water is available only near the surface, the roots that could go deep can become kind of lazy and stay near the surface. Watering deeply encourages the roots to behave more naturally. And a side benefit, deep roots not only survive drought better, which enables you to water less, but deep roots help prevent erosion, which is a very good thing. And since we're talking about landscaping today, we need to at least briefly address lawns. They're parts of most landscapes, so they deserve a few comments. And chances are most people will retain at least some lawn in their landscape. And I do realize there is a trend to, not get rid of lawn grass. And I don't know about Vancouver because I don't live there anymore, but where I live in North Idaho, it's not taking hold. There's lots of lawn here. So what do lawn grasses need? Well, they need a great soil. They need to be well watered. They need to be mowed high, preferably with a mulching mower. They need to be fertilized regularly. They need to have lime applied as necessary, and they need to be aerated yearly. So for turfgrass lawn, we need to water less deeply and more frequently. Yes, irrigating turf grass is done opposite of how you should water an ornamental bed. Pretty confusing. The reason for this is that many plants make roots in proportion to how much foliar growth they make above the soil. So since we cut turf grass short for lawns, the roots are constantly renewing themselves near the surface. Unless you let the grass go very long, many lawn grass species can't make deep roots. Also, for reasons I really don't understand, many turf grass varieties are actually bred to have surface roots. Go figure that one out. And so genetics tell plants how to grow, not just grass, but all plants, and we can't change that fact. So recapping the basics of moisture control, for ornamental gardens, water deeply and infrequently. And for turfgrass lawns, water less deeply and more frequently. And I'm emphasizing the difference in watering ornamental grass or gardens and lawns to illustrate the complexities in what various types of plants need. This is true for moisture control, soil, and all of the other things that plants need. These needs translate into how much work you'll have to do providing for your plants' various needs. This is why understanding what plants need is so very important. Okay, moving on in culture to the topic of sun exposure. For most plants, sunlight is necessary for photosynthesis. Sun exposure, which is how much sunlight the plant gets, affects foliage coloration, bloom or lack thereof, and the overall size and or shape of the entire plant. So on this slide, we are looking at golden oregano. The bottom photo is how the plant looks when it grows in full sun. And the top photo is how the plant looks when it grows in the shade. Yep, it still grows, but the foliage changes color. And you can see one little outlier right there. It must have been close to the edge of the sun. So many plants' foliage changes colors in response to how much sunlight is available. Sometimes they're lighter in shade and sometimes they're darker in shade. But ordinarily, and sometimes they make more blooms in shade, but ordinarily they do bloom less when they're in the shade. And sunlight can affect a plant's overall growth habit. The plants in both of these photos are the same thing, evergreen huckleberry. Not the same plant, of course, but the same genus and species, but planted in different locations. So this top slide is planted in a sunnier location, and when done so, you can expect about 4 feet tall by 6 feet wide. And the plant on the left here is in a shadier forest exposure, and these plants can get up to 12 feet tall and perhaps only 3-ish feet wide. Now this plant is only about 3 feet tall, but look at how different the leaves are. Bright and light, dark and dense, more compact, more spread out. Very different just because of shade versus sun. So sunlight can affect foliage color, bloom, and the size and shape of plants. And the previous slide's mention of plants' growth habits brings us to the topic of size and space. Plants come in such an array of shapes and sizes. They're so cute at the nurseries, all these textures and colors. It's wonderful. Baby plants are cute, and the nurseries arrange them into the most compelling compositions because you know why the because is, because they want your money. They're going to sell them to you. But don't be fooled. Learn about plants before buying them. Understand a plant's size and shape at maturity. It's always good to do some research. That would be fundamental of success number 2, about the plants you intend to have in your landscape before you buy them. So I'm weird. I have this habit of shopping with my camera before my wallet. I know, weird. I go to the nursery and take photos of the things I'm attracted to, and then I go home and do research about how large the plants are going to be when they're all grown up. And I'll check to see how fast or slow they might grow. These things help me manage my expectations. That would be fundamental number 1. Both of the plants in these photos are the same thing, Atlas blue cedar, a cute baby plant above that will grow into the monster plant below if you let it. So this plant, this baby, is about 3 feet tall, and it is really cute. And this mature Atlas blue cedar is about 30 feet long. It's just a question of how much space you have or how much do you want to prune. Okay, the last aspect of culture that I want to mention today is the concept we call right plant, right place. It's a guiding principle that you're going to hear repeated over and over, and it has subtly different definitions depending on who's preaching about it. Today, you're listening to me preach about it, so you're going to have to accept my definition. Here it is. Right plant, right place is respecting the plant's culture needs for appropriate soil, moisture, sun exposure, etc. Selecting plants that are native or zone appropriate and non-invasive. It's respecting Mother Nature. It's being realistic about, especially realistic about your maintenance commitment. And I believe right plant, right place includes being a considerate neighbor. We are all packed so tightly into urban and suburban areas these days. We don't need more tension in our lives. So this photo is of English ivy growing through a chain link fence at a rental house where I once lived in Vancouver. The owner of the ivy on the other side of the fence just loved it, but she didn't prevent it from coming over to my side, thus forcing me to have to prune it several times a year. I just did not think that was all that neighborly. So please be kind to each other. Choose plants that are right plant, right place appropriate, non-invasive, and agreed upon if shared. And this last one is just a neighborly thing. I mean, if you're going to put a big shade tree on your property line and it's going to shade out the only sunspot your neighbor has to have their garden in, which they already have there, that doesn't sound terribly neighborly. How about a slightly smaller shade tree right next to your patio? That sounds more neighborly to me. Okay, here ends the section on plant culture. Culture is what the plants need to grow and thrive. Now we're going to talk about maintenance. This is what you will have to do to make sure your plants are getting what they need. So maintenance involves planting, fertilizing, weeding, pruning, deadheading, watering, repotting, dividing, mowing. Sounds like a lot of work. Well, it is a lot of work. But as we explore these upcoming maintenance topics, I'm going to make suggestions that may help you make wise decisions about what sort of landscape is right for you before you dive into it too deeply. and particularly with respect to doing the maintenance. Remember this slide from the beginning of my talk? I think many gardeners become discouraged with their landscapes because they initially embrace a look or design without understanding what it takes to actually have that look or design. What it takes to have that look or design is maintenance. That is what it takes, maintenance. Understanding your desired landscape's maintenance requirements and your options about those requirements before you create the landscape will help you have a happier, more successful gardening experience. Happier and successful gardening is really what I want for everyone. So ask yourself, do I have the knowledge, skills, and time to do proper maintenance? If not, am I willing to learn these things? Or can I afford to have the maintenance done for me? You know, that guy on the mower, we could hire him. Our answers to these questions can help us gauge our tolerance for doing maintenance. We need to be honest with ourselves right from the get-go. So we're going to look at some situations, conditions, chores, etc., that involve degrees of maintenance that some might find objectionable, the not so fun parts of gardening. Remember, fundamental of success number one about being realistic? Well, prepare yourself for a reality check. First up, cottage gardens. They're pretty, but generally they're composed almost exclusively of perennial flowers and maybe some hedge-like shrubs such as boxwood maybe. Not that there's anything wrong with those types of plants, but understand that plant type affects a garden's level of maintenance. Perennials almost always require the most work, and trees and shrubs almost always require a good bit less work than do perennials. In your garden planning stage, that would be fundamental number two. It's advisable to learn about how your desired plants will grow and what they will need in terms of maintenance. This will help you hold on to realistic expectations. Yep, that is fundamental number one. See how I'm weaving the fundamentals of success into this thought process? Being realistic, planning, plant selection, consideration of the fundamentals of success at all phases of your garden life is a good thing, but it's particularly beneficial when you're planning a new garden or renovating an older one. Continuing on with maintenance and coming back around to lawn grass and its maintenance issues. Lawns are common, as I said, and most residential homes have at least some little bit of lawn. Some neighborhoods actually require homeowners to maintain a certain amount of perfectly manicured lawn. It's crazy, but it's true. So what does it take to maintain a turf grass lawn? The reality of lawn maintenance is what I mentioned in the moisture control section. The things that lawn grass needs to thrive constitute work for you. It needs to be, turf grass lawn needs to be kept well watered. It needs to be mowed high with a mulching mower. It needs organic fertilizer to be applied if the clippings from the mulching mower aren't adequate. It needs to have lime applied if the pH, soil pH is too low, and it needs to be aerated yearly. Most people think that is a lot of work. But if you had a very small yard, it might not seem so bad. And there are some turf grass species blends available that can require somewhat or even a lot less maintenance. Yep, there are some choices when it comes to lawn, and we're going to take a look at just a few of those choices. A while back, as I was preparing this talk, an issue of Condé Nast Traveler magazine arrived at my home. The cover that you see here referred to a story about renting villas in Italy. Woohoo, let's go. But as I looked deeper into the photo, I noticed something. What's wrong with this picture? Do you see it? I think you see it. There's clover in the lawn. Yes, indeed, clover is marring the lawn of this beautiful villa. Who would want to visit there? Certainly not me. But clover is good. It adds nitrogen to the soil. It's evergreen in the Pacific Northwest, and bees love it. This would be an example of a less than perfect lawn. It's a choice, maybe by embracing a new mindset or adjusting our expectations. That would be fundamental number one. We can learn to tolerate some clover or other cute flowering plants in our lawns. Maybe? Could we try? As if tolerating some clover in one's lawn weren't scary enough, now we're really going to go rogue. Non-traditional landscape solutions that avoid traditional lawns altogether. Alternatives to turf grass lawn can require either less or more maintenance. So let me tell you about these two non-traditional solutions. At the bottom is a meadow. This was Sauvie Island a few years ago at the Garden Conservancy tour. And I was really amazed that a lot of the acreage, people, the estates were letting their lawns that they used to mow go to meadow, which I thought was a really cool idea. And then they would mow these paths, walking paths through them. And it seems like a great idea. And, the less work, mow it maybe a couple times a year, except my mower won't mow that. You need a tractor to mow that. So this kind of application, even though it seems like it would be a great choice for everyone because you mow a lot less, don't have the right equipment. It's expensive. So not for everyone. Now looking at the top photo, this was around the corner from where I lived in Vancouver, and I used to go by and I just loved this beautiful little vignette of a garden. And one day I saw the gentleman out there doing something, I can't remember what. And so I said, hey, I loved your garden. How do you like it? And he said, well, I hate it. And holy cow, I wasn't expecting that. And so I asked him why. Why did he hate it? He said, because this requires so much more work. And again, I'm shocked. And he says there's constant weeding and pruning and deadheading of the blooms on the shrubs and the leaves that fall from the tree into the gravel. You have to pick them out constantly. Then he went on to say, when he had lawn here, he could take 15 minutes, walk to his shed, get his mower, mow the grass, return the mower to the shed once a week. That's all he did. Okay, so in evaluating how much work we want to do, are capable of doing, or can afford others to do for us, sometimes we'll find that lawn is the right thing for our needs. And I realize that this is a controversial statement, but it's a true statement. There really is no one size fits all in landscaping. There are many variables, and how the human fits into the picture really figures into the landscape's overall success. So if one does choose or must choose to have lawn grass, in order to save water, they could let the lawn go dormant in the summertime. That would be brown. It's a choice. Two things put lawn grass into dormancy: extreme temperatures, be it cold or hot, and drought. And depending on the species, lawn grass actively grows between temperatures about 45 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And it needs about 1 inch of water a week to avoid dormancy. And it can stay alive about 3 to 6 weeks through a summer dormancy. However, once dormant, it's advisable to water lawn grass every other week. This may seem like a waste of water, but the lawn's not dead, it's just resting. So this would be insurance. And there's a bonus to dormant lawn. It doesn't need to be mowed. So there's less work. Okay, let's move from the lawn to another typical maintenance issue, weed prevention. Other than chemical eradication, which is okay in the most severe circumstances, many people use landscape fabric to prevent weeds, or in this case, black plastic. I'm not sure that's working all that well in this case. So landscape fabric and black plastic do not end weeding in the Pacific Northwest. 50% of our weed seeds are airborne. They fly on the wind currents. And landscape fabric and plastic compromise air and water flow. Yep, air and water flow in and out of the soil. Inhibiting these things will eventually cause soil sterility. Okay, you might think, but I don't want anything to grow in that location anyway. Okay, point taken. But see that black plastic bulge? They're tree roots. Tree roots are something that's growing. They don't count. We don't need healthy soil for trees. Well, yes, of course we do. Whoops. Might there be alternatives to the evil black plastic? Well, yes, of course there are. How about cardboard? It, along with newspaper, has been used for a long time and generally are touted as good environmental choices for weed barrier. But did you know that cardboard is often treated with chemicals to make it stiffer, sturdier, water resistant, or stronger when wet? Are we sure we want those chemicals in our garden? Equally, and perhaps more important, cardboard can inhibit gas migration. It prevents fresh air from getting into the soil and harmful gases created by natural processes in the soil from escaping. This is the same thing plastic can do. And this is bad because soil needs to breathe. And also, when using cardboard as a weed barrier, getting moisture into the soil can be problematic. Since we want to water less, we're embracing drought-tolerant landscapes that don't need regular watering like traditional ones do. And over time, by watering less, cardboard can become too dry or hydrophobic and not let water through at all. Then, when we do water, we're really watering mulch on top of dry cardboard, not plant roots and the soil microbes below the cardboard. Okay, this was the negative part of cardboard. There is some good news regarding cardboard. It does have legitimate uses in the landscape. Excuse me. Cardboard can be used as a non-chemical way to smother existing vegetation like weeds and lawn grass. Lay it before starting a new ornamental bed, but understand that cardboard should be considered temporary and removed or broken into pieces before installing plants. This ensures future water and gas transfer through the soil. However, when using cardboard in a new garden that's to be regularly irrigated, because you're going to plant those baby plants that need a lot of water, the cardboard will, in most cases, degrade, break up, and decompose. So it can be used in brand new gardens that are going to be well watered. It's just not for low water gardens. My advice is to regularly check below the mulch for the first year after laying it to be sure that the cardboard is composting. If it is, then just carry on. If it's not, then do the work of manually breaking it up or removing it. Okay, and good grief. Is your head spinning with all of these options and conditions? Using cardboard as a weed barrier sounds like a lot of work to me. Is there anything good and maybe easier at preventing weeds? Well, yes, I believe there is. Mulch. As I mentioned earlier, most any organic mulch that is high carbon works great as mulch. My personal preference is fall leaves because they're free and they're readily available. But okay, there are a few conditions here as well. And dang it, why can't nature be straightforward? Some leaves that don't work so well as mulch are thick, leathery ones like some magnolias and oak leaves, huge ones like sycamore and big leaf maple leaves, and ones that may have foliar diseases like many of our fruit trees, cherry, apple, peach, etc. Just say no to those leaves. And can't find leaves, have to purchase commercial result or mulch? Yep, more choices on the way. The most common commercial mulches are bark and wood chips, and they are both mostly satisfactory. However, bark is becoming increasingly expensive, at least it is where I live, and its natural wax content can make it problematic in some instances. Wood chips aren't always available, and some services that supply it only want to deliver such a volume as to overwhelm someone with a smaller landscape. But use either of these things if you like them and can get them. Yep, there are a lot of mulch choices. And in the handout, I've included a link to a really nice video on the merits of mulch and cardboard. So please give that a look and check it out. And here's one more choice in the quest to prevent weeds. Plant densely. Mother Nature hates a void. And where there are no plants, do you know what she's going to plant there? I think you do. Pretty darn sure you do. If you said weeds, yep, weeds. So cover the earth completely. Planting densely eventually solves the need for the constant application of mulch, but only if you allow your plant's spent leaves and blooms to drop to the ground, becoming the plant's own mulch, just like Mother Nature does in the forest. Okay, are we sick of weeding yet? I think it's the #1 most hated landscape maintenance chore. Pruning might be the second most hated maintenance chore. And of course, you guessed it, there are choices about pruning as well. Not all plants need to be pruned. Perennials don't get pruned per se, but they do generally require deadheading. Deadheading causes most perennials and annuals too to continue blooming for longer periods of time, and we like that. What is considered to be pruning is when we trim branches off of woody plants. Pruning is done for a multitude of reasons, but from my experience, often in urban and suburban locations, excessive pruning has to be done because plants are chosen without regard to their growth habit, shape, and size. Over time, the plants simply overgrow their spaces. Understanding how large a plant will be at its maturity and close adherence to the right plant, right place principle can help prevent huge pruning chores. And remember the 5 fundamentals of success. When it comes to avoiding too many pruning chores, good design and plant selection, #3, are important during the planning stage, #2, of your landscape, as is being realistic, #1, about your pruning skill level or ability to afford professional assistance, #4. An excessive need for pruning is often the consequence of not paying attention to the fundamentals of success and what plants need. And again, I'm not going to try to teach you anything today about how to prune your plants. I'm just trying to get you to appreciate how the fundamentals of success and understanding what plants need affect the work you have to do in your landscape. Okay, moving on to container gardens. Yeah, you guessed it, there are maintenance issues even with container gardens. So container gardens can require more work than regular out there in the gardens. They require daily watering in the summertime. They require frequent deadheading because we want those flowers to keep on coming all summer long. They require fresh soil yearly because, as I said a few slides ago, containerized plants are generally heavy feeders and they need a lot of fertilization, and they deplete the nitrogen supply in that small amount of soil in their pots. And potted trees need to be root pruned. Who knew? Having plants in containers can add character and beauty to your landscape. It can also add complexity to your maintenance chores, including irrigation. The many maintenance issues with containerized gardens is my segue into the irrigation topic. And to illustrate this, let me tell you a sad story about a once lovely container garden. My container garden, embarrassingly so, and how easy it is not to irrigate properly. So this container, the flower bed in the background, and that little snippet of lawn you see at the very top of the slide, all got similar culture and maintenance. So what went wrong? Well, moisture control is what went wrong. You see, we rarely used this patio because it was off the front door, and we used the garage to enter and leave the house. And since I embraced drought-tolerant landscaping and had appropriate plants in both the garden area and the container, I only watered it about maybe every other week or so, and I just didn't notice the container beginning to fail because, I didn't use that area, out of sight, out of mind. I think we've all been there. What makes the difference in keeping moisture out there in the garden soils versus in container soils is volume. There's way less soil volume inside containers than in any out there in the garden spot in your landscape. And as such, the containerized soil loses moisture much more quickly than does soil out there in the landscape. You can see in the photo here that given the exact same culture and maintenance, how much differently the plants did with the small volume container garden versus the large volume out there in the garden area. But let there be life. So I cut back all the dead foliage to nubbins, and I watered it, and I kept watering, and I watched it, and I prayed a little bit. And it didn't take more than maybe 2 weeks or so for the plants to spring back to life, a testament to hardy perennials, yay, and lesson learned. So container gardens usually require more work, or let's just say more care, than out there in the landscape gardens. The story is a good example of how understanding plant culture, that would be what plants need, can be helpful in understanding your landscape maintenance obligations. And so sticking with irrigation just a bit longer, how much moisture is enough? Well, it depends. What is shown here in these photos is irrigated leaf mulch. So I watered by hand the landscape area around where the container fail was on my patio. And, it seemed like a good thing to do. People think they can adequately water their gardens by hand. They feel it's the personal touch. And I confess I like hand watering as well, but be careful. How much? How long? After 10 minutes of hand watering this area, about 4 feet by 12 feet in size, The leaf mulch was only moistened a 1/4 inch deep. So see, wet, 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 dry, 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 not good, not good at all. So I'm not poo-pooing hand watering, really, I'm not. All I'm saying is you need to be sure the water is getting down to the plant's roots. While doing any type of watering, pull back the mulch and check for wetness. Be sure the water is soaking in past the mulch into the soil. And here's a little bit of food for thought. Though I love leaves as mulch and becoming a fan of wood chips, the reason is that they don't absorb water nearly as quickly as do other mulches like leaves. And because wood chips are sturdier than leaves, you can hand water them using a much more forceful nozzle blast, enabling the water to more quickly get down into the soil. Though be aware that like overly dry cardboard, overly dry mulch of any sort takes longer to get wet. And one last wrinkle about watering by hand: time. Consider how long it will take to water to get down to where it's needed in your ornamental bed. Would you stand in your yard watering for 30 minutes? An hour? 2 hours? What about the other garden beds in your landscape? How long are you willing to stand and water your landscape? Not that there's anything wrong with watering by hand, but and in fact, hand watering can be a good thing if your plants are spread out. You can avoid watering anything that doesn't have anything growing by doing hand watering. And this is something that sprinklers can't do. So know that there are many methods of getting water to your plants. We need to find the one that fits your needs as well as your plant's needs. Okay, so here are some of the irrigation options that are available instead of hand watering. First is the hose end sprinkler, also known as above the ground sprinkler. The advantages are that it's inexpensive and easy to use. The disadvantages are that they can deliver uneven watering patterns, particularly as they age. They can be wasteful due to overspray and evaporation, and they also take time and patience to set up and drag the hoses around your property. Not fun. And then we have in-ground automatic sprinkler. Advantages are that they're convenient once they're installed, and they're generally pretty easy to use. Disadvantages: the systems are expensive and require tearing up your yard for installation. They too can be wasteful and inefficient because the heads can get plugged or out of whack and spray on the concrete and all that kind of stuff. And they need to be maintained at least annually by someone who knows what the heck they're doing. And soaker hoses, advantages: they're inexpensive, efficient, and can be automated. Disadvantages are they pose an overwatering risk because since they lay right on the ground and are often covered with mulch, you can't see them, and hence you sometimes forget to turn them off. And they're also damaged by digging, and they perform very poorly on slopes. And placement is tricky because you have to adjust them as the plants grow, and that means unburying them, winding them, adding more, all kinds of stuff like that. And then finally, automated drip. The advantages are that they're very efficient, they're good on slopes, and they're relatively easy to tailor a system to your garden's needs. The disadvantages are that they're expensive, and as with soaker hoses, they pose an overwatering risk for the same reasons as for soaker hoses. They too are damaged by digging. They're also damaged by rodents gnawing on them. And placement and regular maintenance is a crucial element for these systems. So all of these systems are often better than hand watering in some ways. And of course, in some ways, they're not as good. So options, more options. And wrapping up the irrigation topic, As I mentioned earlier in the talk, it's my opinion that the best thing you can do to avoid irrigation's pitfalls is to plan a landscape that doesn't require much more moisture than what Mother Nature provides on her own. This is more easily done without water-thirsty turfgrass lawn. Remember, ornamental gardens have different moisture needs than do turfgrass lawns. It means incorporating lawn into a low water landscape can be a challenge. Okay, I am going to end today's talk with one last example that I hope will tie together all of today's concepts: the 5 fundamentals of success, what plants need, and how the fundamentals, what plants need, nature, and science affects our landscape choices. So this photo is the backyard of a rental house that I lived in Vancouver. Yes, the same one as that evil English ivy yard. Now, I just mowed it, and since it wasn't my house, I only gave the lawn the smallest amount of effort to keep it alive. Maybe a tiny bit more than that. Those of you out there who know me know I'm just a teensy tiny bit of an overachiever. Anyway, the lawn really only got watered, every other week maybe, and it got mowed weekly with a mulching mower, but no additional fertilization, no weed and feed, nothing like that, the bare minimum. So there I am, I mow it, and I'm looking back over my handiwork, and I'm thinking, wow, that doesn't look bad at all. It's pretty darn good. And I've told my clients over and over again that lawn does not grow in the shade in our area. Yet here it is, thriving lawn. How on earth is there a lush lawn growing in the dense shade of a hawthorn tree? Remember the 5th fundamental of success? Respect Mother Nature. Respecting her also means working with her, letting her help. She wants to help you. She tries to help you. You just have to learn to recognize her gifts. Moss, a gift. Let Mother Nature help you by embracing what naturally occurs in most shady areas in our region. Yes, even when it's in your lawn. I mean, look, it's green. It's green. If we change our perspective or mindset to see things in a new light, we might learn that though we're not getting what we want, we just might find that we're getting what we need. We want lush green lawn grass, but maybe we only need the illusion of lush green lawn grass, which moss does provide. Do you want your gardening experience to be a constant battle or something easier, yet still fulfilling? I challenge you to deny the lushness of this photo's green lawn, complete with its moss. And I swear to you, I did not Photoshop this photo. I did not, really, really and truly. No, I did not. Assuming a fresh attitude about the work of gardening can be very helpful. Gardening can provide opportunities to commune with nature, nurture living things, get smarter, and get some exercise. Understanding what plants need and your obligation to providing what they need are essentials to successful landscaping. Being realistic about your skills and expectations is important. A little attitude adjustment can be helpful. And don't forget to let Mother Nature help. Okay, thank you so much for watching and listening to me yammer on. There are links here for deeper learning. They're also on the handout. So check those out.
Thank you, Beth. Before we let you go, we do have some questions.
Okay.
The first one is how high to mow the lawn?
I recommend 4 inches, 3 or 4. I like to do 4. Some lawn grasses need to be mowed shorter than that, but not most of them. I would say not most of them, 4 inches. And the cool thing about mowing high like that is that the longer the blade, the better resistant it is to burning, and it stays greener longer.
Great, thank you. Another question is, what is the best type of clover and grass mix?
I do not know. I do not have an answer for that. I think that, and the main reason why I don't know is that I have not lived in the Vancouver area for a while, and my grass mixes here in North Idaho are different from your grass mixes there. I would consult with some sort of natural seed blend entity. I found a seed blend for my lawn through a grass seller here in North Idaho, and they custom blended seeds for my exact lawn requirement, which is pretty cool. And I don't know exactly where that would be. I'm sorry, I do not have a resource for Vancouver.
OSU has a really nice eco lawn program. And in fact, they have just launched a study. They're looking for people in Portland that they can study their eco lawns. So if you do an internet search for OSU eco lawn, I think you'll find some good information there.
That's actually what my lawn is called, eco lawn. I'm sure it's probably not the same thing. It's designed for North Idaho, and actually our native grasses here are completely different. So what I'm using for my lawn is fine fescue, and in Vancouver we don't use fine fescue. We use I think tall fescue and bluegrass and some other things blended together. So very different types of grass. When I moved here, I had to learn everything over again about grass. It was pretty crazy.
Okay, and there's another one. It says, if I use ground cover, how do I mulch?
See, this is why eventually you don't mulch. This is why you let the plants drop their leaves and blooms, and that becomes nature's own mulch. That is exactly the point, is when you plant densely, eventually you won't have to mulch anymore, because you'll be letting the ecosystem kind of come together like Mother Nature does in nature out in the woods.
And so we have one more question. It says, we have had several speakers in Eastern Washington tell us to water less often and deeper for grass, yet you stated less water more often. And if you don't mind, Beth, if I jump in, this dueling concept has come to light a lot, because WSU does in fact say that, but OSU has the real turf grass specialist, and they do state what Beth says. So
yep, OSU is where I get my information. Their guy there is extremely knowledgeable about grass, and in my opinion, he is the authority. Sorry, WSU, but you're wrong.
Yep, I agree. So that's all the questions that have come in. I'd like to go ahead and launch the poll. It'll just take us a couple seconds. So please watch for the poll to appear on your screen, and answer the questions and then hit submit. It'll just take a minute. And if other folks do have questions and you'd like to put those in the chat box, we still have time to answer those once the poll is done. So I have launched the poll, and I can tell when people are completing it. So I can see that you're still working on it. And at the end of the poll, you should hit submit so that your answers come through. All right, starting to come in. Okay, we're past the halfway point. Keep it coming. Really appreciate it. Okay, looks like there's just a couple people. At this point, I'm not seeing any additional questions in the chat box. Beth, I want to thank you for all the work you put into this and for your passion for this topic. That was a wonderful presentation. And again, this will be recorded and put on our website, ironically, by Beth in the next couple of days. And if you'd like to send me an email with your email address, then I can add you to our mailing list. Thank you so much and have a good evening.
Thank you.